Part 39. I Can See the Laws of Things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 381. Lord Lindy, you are here. Lan 11's voice was also a little cold, changing from the usual charm or purity. Lin N nodded lightly, without saying much, and directly pulled Lan 11's arm, and then the two disappeared in a wave of space fluctuations. The woman at the service desk suddenly widened her eyes. These people with profound cultivation were so scary, just like ghosts and gods, and their whereabouts were unpredictable. As for Lin N, he directly pulled Lan 11 to the office on the 32nd floor. The woman at the service desk was there, and Lin N couldn't drive her away, so he had to go back to the office to talk. I already know what happened. What is the situation of the missing team and the injured team? Lin N said in a serious voice. The missing team is the third team in the 7th level group. There are 10 people in total, including the captain. All of them are national level gods of law. They disappeared to the north of the Promised City and have not been heard from since. The injured team is the second team in the 2nd level group. There are also 10 people, all of them are world-class gods of law. The team members are basically recovered now, only the captain is still injured, and it seems that his life will has been damaged. According to the people rescued at the scene and the team members, the captain of the second team of the 2nd level group fought against the void demons of the 3 world-class gods of law alone that day. Although he successfully brought the team members back alive and saved most of the people, he himself suffered irreparable injuries. Because the other party involves the 4 monarchs, the deputy commander and I did not make a decision on this matter without authorization. We want to wait for you to return before making a decision. Lin N was silent. He knew that in fact, they had done everything they could. With the existence of the 4 monarchs, they could not make more arrangements. Sighing inwardly, Lin N couldn't help but feel anxious. He didn't know when another person who could stand on his own would emerge among humans. Let's go, take me to see the captain of the 2nd level group. Lan 11 took Lin N to the 28th floor. In front of the service desk, the captain named Lin Yi was quickly called out. Lin Yi looked very young, about 20 years old, but his face looked very pale, and his eyes were a little erratic and dim. After returning from injury, Lin Yi spent almost all his time in that small world. With 100 times the speed of time, a long time has passed, but his life wheel has not healed yet. Seeing Lin N coming at this moment, Lin Yi's complexion finally changed a little, and his eyes were full of mixed feelings. Lin N waved his hand. If it's convenient, take us to your room. Lin Yi nodded excitedly. Yes, Lord Lindy. Arriving at Lin Yi's room, Lin Yi hurriedly pulled out the only 2 chairs. Lord Lindy, Legion Commander, please sit down. Lin N waved his hand. No need to be polite, this emperor already knows about you, and I came to you specially to see how your injury is. Lin Yi was stunned for a moment, and then his face couldn't help but become a little gloomy again. Thank you Lord Lindy for your concern. My injury is that I burned the life wheel that day. This is an irreversible injury, and it should be hopeless. Lin N's eyes were full of purple and black gold. He looked at Lin Yi at a glance. This life wheel was cast by him. At this moment, it was invisible. I saw that the life wheel that was originally brilliant and shining was now melted by 3 or 4/10. The remaining part also had a crack that almost penetrated the entire life wheel. This scene is simply shocking. Lin Yi's expression tightened. He naturally felt this special feeling, as if all the secrets of his body had been seen at a glance. He immediately knew that his situation had been seen through by Lin N. Therefore, Lin Yi clenched his fists fiercely, his eyes were even a little red, and his eyes with a little bloodshot were filled with a strong hatred that was simply deep-rooted. His life is basically ruined. Lord Lin Di, you can see that my life wheel is basically ruined. Now I don't even have the power of a world-class magic god, let alone a national-level magic god. Lin Yi's voice was full of bitterness, and there seemed to be a little helplessness. Such a situation is so similar to Lin An's back then. However, Lin An's legs were ruined, while Lin Yi's life wheel was ruined. The complexity in his eyes flashed away, and Lin An looked at Lin Yi with a sharp gaze. Do you remember who gave you your life wheel? It was Lord Lindy. Lin Yi spoke subconsciously, and seemed a little stunned, but then, as if he thought of something, his eyes suddenly brightened. Lord Lindy, could it be that? Lin An couldn't help but smile. Yes, your life wheel can still be saved. Lin Yi suddenly became excited, and even knelt down directly in front of Lin An on the spot. Please Lord Lindy, save me. But before his knees touched the ground, an inexplicable force supported his body and forced him to stand up again. Lin An knew his inner excitement, and the purple and black gold in his eyes became brighter. The rich and sharp law fluctuations were transmitted from Lin An's body, and soon spread to Lin Yi's body, and Lin Yi's life wheel was like a long hardened earth, suddenly pouring into the sky with rain and dew, and a new vitality began to spread on it. But after just a few breaths, Lin Yi's broken life wheel had been restored to its original state. Lan 11 behind him, her beautiful eyes were full of wonder and shock. She had seen Lin Yi's injuries the first time, so she knew that such injuries were almost irreparable. But in front of Lin An, it was just a look and a few breaths. And such changes were most clearly felt by Lin Yi. At this moment, with the recovery of the life wheel, Lin Yi's spirits also recovered again. Seeing the purple and black gold brilliance in Lin An's eyes fade away, Lin Yi couldn't help but clasp his fists and said, Lin Yi, thanks Lord Lin Di for giving me a new life. Lin An's eyes were full of praise, and he said, don't thank me, you deserve it. Do you remember that afternoon? At that time, you had just awakened your life wheel, and the small world had not been distributed to you yet. At that time, this emperor told you that escorting the peace and stability of mankind is the ultimate meaning of the existence of the Emperor Tian army. Perhaps one day in the future, you will fight for mankind, and then you will be the hero of mankind. At this point, Lin An's eyes glowed brightly. Now, you are a hero. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 382. At this moment, Lin An's gaze seemed to cast 1,000-foot-high light, and his figure seemed to rise infinitely higher. Lan 11's beautiful eyes behind her suddenly showed a strong brilliance, and even inexplicably showed a little fanatical admiration. At this moment, Lin An really interpreted the word leader to the extreme. Needless to say, the excitement in Lin Yi's eyes, hero, these two words are deeply imprinted in his mind. It is conceivable that these two words will definitely last forever in the future. The glory of the Emperor and heaven is incomparable. Ji Yi shouted excitedly, his voice was high and loud, and his excited eyes made Lan 11 even moved. Lin An smiled lightly, keep working hard. After this incident, your work, and even your entire team, will be commended. More people will know about you, and more people will know about the Emperor Tian Legion. Thank you, Lord Lindy. Lin An nodded, then glanced at Lan 11, who had beautiful eyes behind him, and couldn't help but feel a little strange. Shall we go? Ah, Lan 11 was stunned for a moment, then nodded in agreement. After leaving the door, Lin An's expression returned to calm again, and there was a faint hint of coldness in his eyes as deep as the deep sea. The space gradually began to fluctuate. Lin An was about to leave when Lan 11 beside him suddenly said, Master Lin Di, please take Lan 11 with you. Lin An couldn't help but be startled. Where to go? Lan 11 smiled, her eyes as charming as autumn water flashed with extremely bright light. Of course I'm going to find the four monarchs. Don't worry, Lan 11 won't be afraid. As long as Mr. Lin Di is here, I won't be afraid of hell. Lin An couldn't help but laugh, and then his eyes flashed, and a slight sigh flashed in his heart. Naturally, he heard a little of Lan 11's meaning. I will not go looking for them for the time being. The four great monarchs could suppress them when I was the God Emperor. Now that I have entered the divine wilderness, they can no longer enter my eyes. After finishing speaking, Lin An stepped into the space crack and reappeared in mid-air. Four great monarchs, I will give you 3 days to send all humans back to me. If after 3 days, those humans still don't appear in front of this emperor, you four, as well as all the forces under your command, all the clansmen, everyone included, will be killed without mercy. An extremely loud sound, like thunder in the void, suddenly exploded in the sky. The terrifying power of cultivation was fully revealed at this moment, and it could be seen that as the words spread, there seemed to be a layer of ripples that spread out in all directions in an instant. This ripple seemed to contain mysterious and incomprehensible fluctuations. It was extremely stable. While it spread thousands of miles in an instant, it showed no sign of dissipating. Instead, it spread faster and faster. It looks like it's going to spread all over the world. In the city of promise, countless people looked up at the faintly visible figure in shock, with expressions of deep awe. Just a voice coming from an unknown distance had already caused their cultivation to tremble. This is their leader, the great human emperor who brought them new life, Emperor Lin. And as the words were transmitted, when the content of the words was heard by people, it once again caused a huge wave. Emperor Lin, stand up for them again. Suddenly, a voice suddenly sounded from nowhere, and then it seemed to be contagious, causing countless people to be infected and shout together. Emperor Lin is mighty. Emperor Lin is mighty. Below, in the Emperor Tian Palace, Lan 11's beautiful eyes were a little stunned, and her pretty face was also filled with shock. Is this the spirit of Mr. Lin Di? She originally thought that Lin An was going to the territory of the four monarchs to ask for people, but she didn't expect that Lin An didn't even bother to go, and spread the news all over the world, and even started to exterminate the clan. However, after being shocked, the brilliance in Lan 11's beautiful eyes became even brighter, and the moving arc at the corner of her mouth could not help but rise a little. No wonder, this is what I like about Mr. Lin Di. In the north, Shenting. In front of a magnificent palace complex. There are alien races coming and going among them. The races of these alien races are not the same, but one thing is very similar, and that is their grotesque appearance. And in the center of these palaces, there is the most magnificent and huge palace. In front of the palace, there is a figure standing. This person is the monarch priest of the Northern Divine Court. The priest was originally a foreigner, but he felt that human appearance was more beautiful, so he chose to transform. At this moment, the priest stood in front of his palace, looking up at the sky with a rather worried look on his face. Not long ago, an inexplicable uneasiness suddenly emerged in his heart. The priest's eyes were filled with thoughts, as he recalled what might have happened. After thinking about it, there seemed to be only one flaw, and that was the attack on humans. Could it be from Emperor Lin's side? In the early years of Xuanhuan, the priest had a cautious temperament and relied on this uneasy and inexplicable intuition to avoid life and death crises more than once. But later on, his cultivation had reached its peak, and there were very few people in the world who could threaten his life, so this feeling had not occurred for many years. At this moment, the priest frowned and unconsciously recalled those critical moments in his memory, and his inner uneasiness became even stronger. At this moment, in the sky he was looking at, a ripple suddenly came out. And accompanying it, there was the sound of words that were like swallowing mountains and rivers with anger. The priest couldn't help but be stunned, but when he heard the content of Lin An's words clearly, his expression changed drastically in an instant. Lin, Emperor Lin. The priest's inner uneasiness reached an extreme level in an instant, and his face could not help but turn pale at this moment. Yes, this sense of crisis really comes from Emperor Lin. A cold sweat broke out on the priest's back. Recalling the scene when Lin An crushed the three of them alone that day, his eyes were filled with bitterness. But despite the bitterness, there was actually a little bit of happiness on the priest's face. At the same time, huge waves of sound also resounded throughout the world on the territory of the other three monarchs. The Lord of the Void looked gloomy. Such a big posture. The so-called human emperor is just a human being in the final analysis. If you, Emperor Lin, had done this before, it would have been fine, but now things have changed. You, Emperor Lin, must not have imagined what kind of opportunities we have had. 3 days will give you 3 more days of pride. After 3 days, the deadline you specified has become your death date. I really don't know how your Emperor Lin should feel. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 383. Time passes quietly. Due to Lin En's decision, the 3 King Ian girls' play was also delayed and they stayed in the Dishan Palace all day. However, the 3 women are not ignorant. Lin En's words spread all over the world that day, and they all knew that Lin En had something to do, so they did not complain. Instead, they asked questions and became concerned about what would happen in 3 days. However, with Lin En's comfort, the 3 girls quickly relaxed and returned to their normal state. In this way, 3 days passed by in the blink of an eye. In the morning, Lin En was sitting in front of the coffee table, holding a cup of tea in his hand. As the hot air blew gently, Lin En's eyes fell on the pavilions outside the window, with a slight coldness in his eyes. Wait a little longer, maybe it will take time for them to bring humans. On the other side of the room, Kimeng leaned on the bedside, holding her head in her hands, looking at the silent Lin En and couldn't help but speak. Banmen walked out of the bathroom and said calmly, "Since we have the strength to crush them, why wait? We all know the fact that those humans have a very slim chance of survival." King Ian blinked her beautiful eyes, which revealed an indescribable brilliance, and even her entire temperament changed a little. "If we fall out directly, there will be no room for easing this matter. If my brother says he wants to annihilate the clan, then he will definitely annihilate the clan. Do you know how many lives will be killed if the clan is annihilated?" Kimeng was on the side, frowning slightly, looking thoughtfully at King Ian, who was full of life. There was no confusion in Lin En's eyes, and she said softly, "You don't need to say anything, I know it in my heart." Not long after, a strong space storm suddenly broke out not far away. Lin's eyes suddenly flashed, "Here it comes." The space fluctuated, and Lin En took one step forward and reached the sky. In front of his eyes, the figures of the 3 great monarchs, the Void Monarch, the Immortal, and the God of Destiny, emerged, standing not far away. As soon as the 3 monarchs arrived here, they looked towards each other. When they saw that only 3 people arrived, their eyes could not help but sink. "The 4 people we agreed to arrive together, why is there one missing now? What is that guy doing, the priest?" Lin En's eyes were deep. "Are you 3 here to return humans? If not, you wouldn't have to leave today." The Lord of the Void suddenly snorted coldly, What a loud tone. I'm not afraid that Fengda will flash his tongue." The God of Destiny spoke leisurely on the side, "The trajectory of fate is spreading, Emperor Lin, prepare to accept your fate." The Immortal's eyes narrowed slightly. "Before you can achieve immortality, you must first live. Emperor Lin, do you think you can continue to live after today?" Lin En remained calm, with some doubts in his eyes. "Actually, I'm curious about what gave you the courage to stand in front of me and speak so brazenly. The 4 of you working together are nothing more than rubbish in front of me, but now, you dare to come in front of me and talk about your fate of life and death. Do you think that this emperor is being alarmist and does not dare to really exterminate the clan?" The Lord of the Void sneered, "Poor people living in dreams. Self-righteousness is your biggest weakness as humans. Do you really think we dare to die without any preparation? As the Lord of the Void finished speaking, a mighty aura suddenly spread out. It is as vast as an abyss, as vast as a prison, and as vast as a sea of smoke, with a somewhat terrifying will contained within it. Lin En could tell at a glance that this fluctuation had surpassed the God Emperor, touched a trace of the fluctuation of will, and was only one step away from the divine desolation. And with the changes in the Void Lord, the Immortal and the God of Destiny also lost their momentum one after another. They are the same, they are both at the peak of the God Emperor, half a step into the desolate state of God. Lin En couldn't help but his eyes flashed, and thousands of thoughts flashed through his mind. It seems that these three people have another chance, or someone can help them. No, it should be said that there were originally 4 people, but the appointed priest didn't show up for some reason. The Lord of the Void was as powerful as a rainbow, and the vast spiritual power surged, making him feel refreshed all over his body. He couldn't help laughing twice, and said loudly, "Emperor Lin. Have you seen it? The 3 of us are far from what we were before. Now, we are already half a god." The God of Destiny also smiled lightly. Destiny is unpredictable. Although the priest has not come, but with the 3 of us, Emperor Lin, your fate has been determined. However, as the sound spread, the 3 of them discovered that Lin En's expression had not changed at all. His eyes, which had become calm from beginning to end, were still calm at this moment. The Lord of the Void couldn't help but change his expression, and said coldly, "You are still trying to show off your strength even when you are about to die. Emperor Lin, you really have the demeanor of an emperor." Lin En almost laughed, and the disdain in his eyes flashed. "If this is what you have to dare to come to me and talk nonsense, then..." When he said this, Lin En's eyes suddenly turned cold. "Then you can go die." In an instant, with the change in Lin En's eyes, the world suddenly changed. Thick dark clouds suddenly gathered above the clear sky. The rolling clouds, like black clouds over a city, spread all over the sky in an instant. At this scene, it seemed as if the entire sky was crushing down on the 3 of them. At the same time, the purple gold and black gold in Lin En's eyes also shone brightly, and an aura far beyond the realm of the God Emperor was released. In an instant, the 3 Void Lords suddenly changed their colors. "Xuanhuan. This is Xuanhuan. You actually reached Xuanhuan." The Void Lord was horrified, with a deep fear on his face. The Immortal was also horrified. "Impossible. How could you have reached Xuanhuan earlier than the 3 of us?" The God of Fate frowned and said nothing. Lin En smiled faintly, and when he was about to speak, suddenly another strong space fluctuation came. Lin En and the 3 monarchs looked at the same time, and the figure of the priest suddenly appeared in the air here. Not only that, behind the priest, there were a large number of figures, all of them were humans, and there were world-class gods among them, and the total number was over 1,000. Lin En's eyes flashed. Although these humans had injuries on their bodies, Lin En could see at a glance that they were minor injuries that did not cause any trouble. Most of their foundations were not damaged at all, and they obviously had not suffered any bad treatment. Lin En couldn't help but flash his eyes and looked at the priest again. The faces of the 3 Void Lords changed again in an instant, and a rather bad feeling suddenly rose in their hearts. "Priest, what do you mean?" The Void Lord's eyes were bloodshot, and he couldn't help but speak in a rather gloomy and cold voice. But the priest clasped his fists towards Lin En from a distance, bowed and said, "Lord Lin Emperor, the priest has sent all the humans here as ordered. I can see the laws of things." Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 384. Lin En looked at the scene quietly with a smile on his face. Hearing this, the 3 Void Lords turned completely cold, and a strong murderous intent spread. The priest remained calm and spoke again, "Lord Emperor Lin, the priest has his own difficulties, but the priest knows the majesty of Lord Emperor Lin, so all the humans attacked by the priest were just kidnapped. No one died, and no one was seriously injured. 3 days ago, Lord Lin An spoke, and the priest knew that it was time to release these people. He only hoped that Lord Emperor Lin would be merciful and let the priest go. As the words spread, the Void Lord was furious. Priest, you are a shameless villain. We agreed to join forces that day, but you broke your promise. The immortal also had a cold face at this moment. After today, if we still have a chance of survival, your northern divine court will be splattered with blood. Lin An's eyes moved, and after a moment he said, Priest, this emperor has seen your sincerity, and your death sentence is forgiven. You wait aside, and when this emperor is done here, we will talk about you and me. The priest clasped his fists and bowed, I will obey the decree of Lord Lin. Lin An's eyes became calm again. Yizhan, take the humans back. Below, among the countless people looking up at the sky, a figure suddenly soared into the sky, and then flew down with the humans. At this time, Lin An's eyes fell on the 3 people of the Void Lord again. You won't have a chance to survive. Today, the 3 of you will die. The forces behind you will be uprooted and all the alien races will be exterminated. How shameless! The Void Lord was ruthless, and his aura suddenly rose. His eyes were hysterical, and he was obviously going to fight to the death. On the other side, the Immortal and the God of Destiny were exactly the same, and their auras were also fierce. Lin An's eyes were calm, and a white sword appeared in his hand after a long time. The white sword skillfully turned out a sword flower and swung it down, and it actually raised 100-foot wave of air in an instant. Lin An stepped on the ground, and in an instant, a black and gold translucent light curtain suddenly stretched out from under Lin An's feet, and in the blink of an eye it had spread for 100 miles. And Lin An looked up again, and the purple gold light curtain condensed above the sky, and in an instant it also spread for 100 miles. At this moment, the purple gold dome, the black gold earth, and the entire world seemed to be infinitely tall. Lin An's eyes shone brightly. As the light curtain was deployed, his aura seemed to rise again. The solemn pressure seemed to radiate the overwhelming power of the Emperor. What is this? The face of the Void Lord changed. He felt a little frightened in this place. There was also a strong sense of uneasiness in the eyes of the God of Destiny. It should be the method of Xuanhuan. Lin An smiled lightly. Creation is the sky, destruction is the earth, life and death are in a thought. This world is called a piece of heaven and earth. As Lin An smiled lightly, the air seemed to be slightly solidified, and a strong sense of stagnation appeared around him. Imprisonment. The next second, as soon as Lin An finished speaking, the 3 Void Lords were shocked to find that their bodies could not move. It seemed that countless unknown things wrapped their whole bodies and they could not move at all. What's going on? I can't move. Me too. The 3 were shocked and angry, but Lin An's eyes were full of divine light. In a single thought, thousands of laws cooperated autonomously, and this is a world. In the past, he had to control the laws to act, but now in this world, with just a thought, thousands of laws have automatically cooperated to create the effect of Lin An's will. This is the true power of will, and it is also the real difference. Will into domain, this is the root of the power of Xuanhuan. If the domain is established, Xuanhuan will be established, and if the domain is destroyed, Xuanhuan will be destroyed. The struggle between Xuanhuan is the struggle between domains. The 3 Void Lords are only half a step into Xuanhuan, and they only have a little bit of the prototype of will. Not to mention the will into domain, they don't even have a complete grasp of the will. At this moment, the 3 people in the domain are like puppets, staying there motionlessly. As soon as Lin An's mind moved, the fluctuations of the laws around the 3 Void Lords suddenly became more intense. I saw that around the 3 people, a bunch of flying swords were condensed in an instant. Each of these flying swords has a different color, and the fluctuations flowing on them are also completely different. Sharp, tough, Frozen. Looking around, densely packed, overwhelming. The three Void Lords were immediately furious, their scalps numb, and even their eyeballs were about to pop out. What is this? The densely packed swords of law formed a huge circle, surrounding them from all sides, and the sword tips were all facing them without exception. Just the breath alone made their eyelids jump. But at this moment they were still imprisoned, and their whole bodies, even including their eyeballs, could not move at all. So they couldn't even say a word of begging for mercy. Lin An's eyes shone brightly. This emperor has already stepped into the godly wilderness, but he has never killed all of you aliens, but you are really stubborn and unforgivable. At this point, Lin An closed his eyes slightly and turned around, and the thousands of sword shadows behind him, like thousands of swords returning to their roots, rushed towards the three people in the center at the same time. Blood flew everywhere. Lin An was silent for a moment. The purple gold and black gold light curtain turned into tiny dust crystals, and the light in Lin An's eyes quietly dissipated. The priest stood aside, his face horrified, his body stiff. It can be clearly seen that a trace of cold sweat was sliding down his temples. In just a few breaths, or even less than a cup of tea, the other three monarchs who were as famous as him on this earth died just like that. What kind of power is this? And then, the priest not only had a deep sense of surviving a disaster, but also felt grateful for his inexplicable premonition of uneasiness in his heart. If not for this, he would have ended up exactly the same as the three Void Monarchs. Obviously, that premonition has saved his life again. After a moment, Lin An raised his eyes again, and his eyes had returned to a calm state. Priest, now we can talk about our affairs. The priest bowed respectfully and clasped his fists sincerely. Lord Lin An, the priest is willing to be Lord Lin An's servant and serve you. As for the people under the priest, if Lord Lin Emperor likes them, they can also serve you. Speaking of this, the priest seemed to be embarrassed. I just beg Lord Lin Emperor to show mercy. After all, they are thousands of lives. I beg Lord Lin Emperor, even if you are a slave, please let them go. On behalf of the clan behind me, the priest is grateful for your merits for all eternity. The words scattered, startled a group of flying swallows, and then a mysterious wave suddenly spread here, accompanied by a voice. It's really wonderful. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 385. The faint voice contained extremely mysterious fluctuations, like a visitor from outside. The sound was not loud, but it reached people's ears strangely and clearly. At the same time as the sound came, the priest's expression suddenly changed. However, although he was frightened inside, the priest's expression was pretending to be calm. Comparatively, Emperor Lin was standing here. He didn't dare to make the slightest move. Lin An's eyes flashed and he looked calmly into the endless void. He could vaguely feel that the source of the sound was not located here, but seemed to be hidden in the universe. Who are you? Lin An said calmly. Another one came to ask me who I was. The so-called Lord of the Void was like this before, and you are like this now. Lin An couldn't help but narrowed his eyes slightly. It seems that the three monarchs rely on you, including the improvement of their strength. It must be thanks to you. The mysterious voice smiled and said, that's not necessarily the case. Your fellow humans have also contributed a little bit. The life will you awakened for them is really a good tonic for the three monarchs. Lin was silent. This is not only a provocation, but also a naked slap in his face. With murderous intent rising in his heart, Lin An's expression remained unchanged. Who are you? Do you dare to come out and see me? The tone of the mysterious voice was a bit disdainful. Only you? I'm sorry, you really don't deserve it? I condensed a shadow at random, but you can meet it? As he spoke, a wave of waves came from the void in front of him, and then a black shadow quietly condensed out. Indescribably huge, that phantom seemed to occupy half of the sky, with black light and shadow edges, and streaks of lightning attached to it, looking like a void demon. And this black shadow is really like a shadow. You can't see clearly the specific appearance of the black shadow. Everything you see is black. Gigi's weird laughter came from the black shadow's head, and the voice in the void also sounded again, "This shadow has 1/10,000,000th of my strength. You can play with him first." Lin En couldn't help but sneer, "It's just a trick to pretend to be a god. This kind of poor measurement is less than 1/10,000,000th of this emperor's." Lin En's words were even more horrifying for no other reason than this mysterious shadow was just making nonsense. This black shadow had fluctuations comparable to those of the gods. Said that Xuanhuan is only 1/10,000th of him. Lin En secretly laughed inwardly, "He is 1/10,000th. As he spoke, a cold look appeared on Lin En's eyebrows. He raised his hand and waved, and the world spread instantly. The purple and black gold light curtains covered the entire sky and earth in an instant. The view was endless. And in this square of heaven and earth, Lin En's eyes shined brightly, and a shocking giant hand suddenly condensed from the sky. It was unimaginably huge. The shadow already occupied half of the sky, but the giant hand was even bigger than the shadow. It was much bigger than the shadow. Colorful rays of light fell on it one after another, but the edge of the giant hand was as dark as ink, with a crumbling and destructive aura attached to it. This is a giant hand with thousands of laws as its heart and a skin that collapses. The appearance of the scene was so spectacular that it was unimaginable. The giant hand covered most of the sky and crashed down on the phantom below. The shadow immediately made a screaming sound, and its shape actually changed. In an instant, it formed a spherical shape, and on the surface of the ball, countless densely packed vertical thorns extended outwards. Lin En's expression did not change, and the huge hand suddenly pressed down on the spiked ball. The spiked ball rolled down with countless vertical stabs, and then was slapped down by the big hand. In the loud explosion, the huge thorn ball exploded into nothingness. Although many holes were pierced by the spikes in the big hand, its shape did not disappear at all. On the contrary, when the thorn ball disappeared, it was leaked. A hint of coercion came. Just a hint of it still made countless people watching the battle below look horrified, and the aura of indifference like the way of heaven made many people take a deep breath. Lin En clapped his hands, and then said casually, "That's it? How dare you bring out such unsavory things to make people look embarrassed? You are indeed a dirty rat, not worth mentioning." The mysterious voice seemed to ignore it and smiled sarcastically, "You have no idea what you are facing, frog in the well. We will meet one day." As the words fell, the strange fluctuations immediately dissipated, and the air fell into silence, as if nothing had happened. Lin En's eyes flashed, and there was a thought in his eyes, and then he subconsciously looked into the depths of the void. There will be a day when we meet, that is to say, we can't meet now. There must be something wrong with the other party's current state. Lin En really wanted to follow the aura and pursue the past. This time, he secretly helped the three monarchs to oppose him. The two of them were now on opposite sides. Lin En really wanted to follow the clues and eliminate the root causes. It's just that the other party's aura was weird, but it also dissipated extremely completely. Lin En could only vaguely feel that the other party was in an unknown place in the universe, but he didn't know where it was. That's all. Until the next meeting, it's hard to say whether the other party is qualified to be your opponent. Withdrawing his gaze, Lin En glanced at the priest standing aside, and there was an illusion of relief on his face. Lin En smiled half-heartedly, "Priest, you must have benefited when the other party helped the other three people before. Although your cultivation is not as complete as the Void Lord and the other three, you have indeed made considerable progress." Progress. The priest's eyelids jumped, he laughed dryly and bowed, "Lord Lin has a keen eye for talent, the priest admires you very much." As Lord Lin said, the mysterious existence gave each of us a purple crystal that day, which contains unimaginable spiritual power, so we broke through very quickly. It's just because the three of them devoured many human life wheels, and I didn't dare to touch any human, so I opened up a little gap with them in cultivation. Lin En nodded, and then said, since you are willing to be a slave, now that things are over, what are you waiting for? The priest's heart tightened, his face was a little bitter, but he had to do so. He lowered his head slightly, and suddenly there was a mysterious wave in the void, floating out from his crown. This thing is invisible, but it can cause the air to distort, and some outlines can be vaguely seen, like a strange little beast. The priest looked pale and spoke with difficulty, Lord Lindy, this is the origin of my soul. As long as you release a drop of blood essence and drip it on it, it will form a slave seal. If you want to touch it again, it must be your will. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 386. Lin En nodded lightly, then released a drop of blood essence and merged into it. Lin En's eyes were full of wonder, and he saw that drop of blood essence, as if it had merged into the water, quickly spread down, but he could faintly find that the spread of blood essence seemed to form a special symbol. The priest took the soul origin back into his body, and suddenly, an inexplicable feeling arose in Lin En's heart, and he would die if he thought of it. Lin En secretly sighed at the power of the soul contract, and then looked down again. With a flash of his figure, Lin En came to Yi Zhan's side. How are those people? The sudden voice sounded beside him, and Yi Zhan seemed to be startled, and he was stunned for a while before he smiled bitterly twice. Since they all have some cultivation, some minor injuries are not serious. They just need to rest for a while. Lin En nodded. Is the team of Emperor Tianjun among them? Yi Zhan said hurriedly, they are all among them. They are also fine. Lin En nodded, and then his figure flashed and came to Lan 11's side again. Seeing Lin En's return, Lan 11's beautiful eyes were filled with moving brilliance. At this moment, the rescued members of Emperor Tianjun had returned to Emperor Tian Palace to recuperate. Meet Lord Lin Di. Lin En smiled faintly, then grabbed her arm, and the two of them disappeared on the spot. East of the earth, the Void Palace. The news of the death of the Void Lord had not yet been passed on, and Lin En appeared in the air with Lan 11. The huge thoughts like the tide spread out, like a tsunami covering the sky and the earth, and instantly crushed down, and it was unknown how far it spread in an instant. Lan 11's face was stunned. As she was closest to Lin En, she naturally felt Lin En's actions and was a little shocked by Lin En's methods. Lin En's eyes were shining with divine light, and in an instant, he had explored this world. You and the Emperor Tian army have spent almost all your time in cultivation so far. Even if you occasionally practice with each other, it is not comparable to a real life and death fight. Now that the Void Lord is dead, I have searched this place just now. The person with the highest realm is only a demigod. At this point, Lin En's eyes shone even brighter. I remember you said that if you follow me, you are not afraid even of hell. Lan 11's beautiful eyes moved, thinking about the meaning of Lin En's words, but when she heard the last sentence, her eyes seemed to abandon everything, and in an instant they were as bright as stars. Yes, Lan 11 said this, and this will always count. Lin En's heart was almost surging, and he pulled Lan 11 away again. A moment later, the two showed up and were already in a jungle. This place seemed to be a wilderness with weeds everywhere. Not far from here, there was a huge towering tree. The tree was so thick that 10 people could hug it. On the trunk of the tree, there was a huge creature hovering on it. It was a big snake. The terrifying snake god, as thick as a basin, was so long that it could be seen circling the tree for 6 or 7 times. At this moment, on the huge snake head, the tightly closed and terrifying mouth was spitting out its tongue, staring at Lin En and the others with full vigilance. This snake is at the level of a world-class magic god. It is not difficult for you to fight it with your cultivation. Kill it. This is your first task today. Lin An's voice was flat, and his eyes were calm, as if he was telling an ordinary little thing. Lan 11's face turned pale for a moment, but then her eyes showed a strong and firm look. Not only because she was the commander of the Emperor Tian Legion, but also because it was the intention of Emperor Lin. Lin An was watching here. How could she be afraid of fighting? A deep demigod aura flowed out from Lan 11's body, accompanied by a very cold aura. The next second, in an instant, 1,000 miles of ice. The extremely cold ice spread in an instant. This place was originally a jungle, but in the blink of an eye, it was like being in the cold region of the northern country, covered with ice. Lin An retreated a little, leaving the battlefield to Lan 11, and floated not far away and watched quietly. Lan 11's graceful body floated slightly in the air, and a faint chill lingered around her body, as if she was covered with a layer of fairy-like gauze. She stretched out her white hand and waved it, and saw that the surroundings of the big snake in front of her were instantly filled with dense ice cones. Then, the wave formed by the ice cones crushed down like an overwhelming force. The big snake had been extremely alert for a long time. Seeing the ice cones coming, the big snake hissed and climbed down the tree in an instant. The speed of such a huge body was surprisingly fast. Next, the big snake seemed to have turned into a loach, its body winding forward at a terrifying speed, constantly flowing between the trees, dodging the ice cones that fell from the sky. For a moment, Lan 11 couldn't do anything to it. Lan 11 waved her hand again, and ice spikes suddenly appeared on the ground, and the range was actually one piece after another. But who knew that the body of the big snake was extremely hard, and it smashed into those ice cones. Even the ice cones under its belly could hurt it a little, but it didn't have much impact. Instead, the big snake swam quickly, and its speed became faster and faster. Lan 11's eyes were filled with evil, and she was about to show her power again, but suddenly the direction of the big snake changed, and the tongue opened a terrifying mouth, and it actually rushed straight to her body. In a flash, Lan 11's beautiful eyes changed, and her body moved 3 feet horizontally in an instant, which was incredible. The speed in an instant was just like teleportation. And then, Lan 11's hand was suddenly covered with a layer of ice, and then the ice suddenly expanded, forming a huge ice hand in the blink of an eye. Lan 11's pretty face was cold, and she slapped the snake with her ice hand without any hesitation, and she slapped the snake to the ground with one slap. The dazzling blood sprayed like a column, and the whole body of the snake was broken into 3 parts. The part in the middle that was hit was already bloody. Lan 11 floated in the air, her pretty face was a little pale, and her hands covered her chest. Obviously, so much blood made her feel uncomfortable. Lin An was silent, and came to Lan 11 after a while. "How is it?" Lan 11 panted slightly, just wanting to leave here quickly. The strong smell of blood in the air almost made her vomit. However, Lan 11 panted a few times, but said, "It's okay, it will be fine in a while." Lin An thought for a moment, felt Lan 11's current state again, and then pulled Lan 11's arm and left again. After a moment, he reappeared, and the world in front of him had changed. This place was a plain, and not far away, there was a pack of wolves. Nearly half of them were national-level magic gods, and the Wolf King who led them was a world-class magic god. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 387. As soon as she saw the wolf pack, Lan 11 understood what Lin An meant. Thinking back to the terrible snake, Lan 11 almost vomited subconsciously. Lin An's face was calm, and she could not tell whether he was happy or angry. Lan 11 looked at Lin An with a look of resentment. She knew that Lin An had seen many of her little thoughts in the past, but now, Lin An was still so ruthless. Lan 11 was secretly angry and secretly cursed Lin An for being a blockhead, but it was only for a moment. In addition to the resentment, it can be seen that there was a stubbornness rising from the bottom of her eyes. This process was carried out 7 times in total on this day. And Lan 11's opponent started from a world-class magic god, then evolved into a group of world-class magic gods, and then to a demigod, and 2 demigods. In the end, Lan 11 could face 3 demigods alone. Although she could not win, she could hold on for a long time. During this process, Lin An only saved Lan 11 once when she faced a demigod for the first time. After that, he didn't need to do anything again. When Lan 11 was no longer so slow in the fight, Lin An repelled the 3 demigods and imprisoned them with a thought. At this moment, although Lan 11's tight leather clothes were not much messy, her complexion was obviously much worse, and her pretty face was still very pale. This was due to excessive consumption. After consecutive battles, even though Lan 11's demigod cultivation was almost exhausted. However, apart from these, one could see the sharpness in Lan 11's eyes, which was murderous intent. Lin An witnessed the whole process of this day. Now Lan 11's hands were really stained with blood. Now she can be called a cold rose. Seeing Lin An repelling the beast, Lan 11 forced a smile, and then said faintly, "Emperor Lin, I wonder if I can make you like me more." After speaking, a strong sense of weakness came over her, and she felt dizzy in her head, and she couldn't help shaking. Lin An took a step forward and supported her arm. Lin An naturally heard the tone of his words, but it was also for her good. As the leader of the Emperor Tian army, how can you accomplish anything without experiencing blood? Lin An sighed in his heart, not only do you have to make me like you more, but you also have to make your subordinates, and even the world, like you more. Otherwise, how can you keep the position of the army leader? Lan 11 paused. She was very smart, and she knew what Lin An said. The sentence just now was just a little emotion. Seeing Lin An's explanation, Lan 11 felt a little embarrassed. She was wrong about this matter. Lin An is the Emperor Lin, and he came to help her transform in person, but she said so. Who gave her the courage? Lan 11 knew clearly that Lin An acted like this, not because Lin An felt guilty, but because she, Lan 11, was the commander of the Emperor Tian army, and because she had indeed been recognized by Lin An in the past. Otherwise, how could Lin An tolerate others being so presumptuous? Under this situation, Lan 11 forced herself to be a little more spirited. Lan 11 thanks Lord Lin Di for his support. Lin An smiled slightly, with a little satisfaction in his eyes. Don't thank me, it's you who have the qualifications and potential. If it were someone else, this emperor would not do this. Lan 11 is a rare genius with the same qualifications in 2 laws. Lan 11 has a deep talent for ice and speed, so when Lin An condensed the fate wheel for her, it was the fate wheel of the 2 laws, and it was because of this that Lan 11 could be so powerful. This matter was done, Lin An took Lan 11's arm and took a step out, returning to the 31st floor of the Emperor Tian Palace. In front of the door, Lin An said, "I have imprisoned all the demigods in the east, west, and south. That place can be used as a place for the Emperor Tian army to grow. You should understand what I mean. Try to ensure their safety. This matter is left to you. If you have any difficulties, you can talk to Yi Zhan." After these words came out, Lan 11 nodded in agreement, and Lin An took another step back to the top floor. It was already late, and the sunset had faded. Lin An suddenly stood in the room, attracting the attention of King Ian and the other 2 girls at the same time. "Brother," King Ian cried out. "Is everything settled?" Kimeng raised her eyebrows. Lin An nodded. "The 3 giants were killed during the day, and those subordinates with high cultivation have been imprisoned by me. Alas, this world should be peaceful from now on." Lin An sighed, as if he was quite tired. Ban Meng's pretty face remained cold. "What about the priest?" Lin En returned to the sofa and fell down. As the Emperor of God, the priest is not far from the godly wasteland. With such strength, he must be brought back to my Jiuzhu region. And his subordinates, those with stronger strength, are all enslaved and taken back to serve as guards in our Jiuzhu region. Those with weaker strength are simply released. Ban Meng nodded and stopped talking, obviously tacitly agreeing to this matter. King Ian seemed to be acting like a spoiled child. Sister Ban Meng, why are you talking about these things? Brother is finally back. Let's talk about where to go tomorrow. Kameng's beautiful eyes flashed a little brilliance. Sister is right, Lin En, you are a busy man and finally have some free time. Lin En showed a little bitter smile in his eyes, but he also thought that it was time to accompany the three women. In this world, the three women have many curiosities, which is very rare. As a result, in the next few days, Lin En did not take any action. Instead, he accompanied the three women in this huge agreed place and strolled around like an ordinary person. However, in order not to attract people's attention, Lin En had to change his appearance a little. This star-like treatment made the three women giggle. That day, Lin En was walking on the street and suddenly heard the discussion of passers-by. Hey, have you heard that the human beings who were kidnapped a few days ago were first brought back by the Emperor Tian army? The Emperor Tian army? What is that? Is it the newly established army by the deputy commander? Hey. No, no. The Emperor Tian army, stationed in the Emperor Tian Palace, is the army directly under Lord Emperor Lin. Every member of the Emperor Tian army is a national-level god of law, or even a world-class god of law, and even has demigods. The army directly under Lord Emperor Lin. No wonder it is so strong. The deputy commander has announced to the world that the Emperor Tian army is the umbrella of our human beings, and its highest mission is to maintain human peace and stability. Walking in the streets, these rumors gradually reached Lin En's ears. Hey! Lin En! What do you think of this wind chime? It should look nice if hung at home. Lin En looked back and saw Chi Meng calling out excitedly. Lin En smiled and the corners of his mouth raised a little unconsciously. It looks good. I'll buy it. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 388. Lin En had a few days of leisure. These days, Lin En often appeared on the streets of the Promised City with the three girls, tasting the local costumes, trying the local food, and so on. Even once, he was met by Yi Zhan when he was out, so the identities of the three girls were also known by Yi Zhan. It turned out that Lord Lindi had three wives, and he knew nothing about this before. When he saw that the three girls were actually a god emperor and two demigods, Yi Zhan was shocked for a while, especially the god emperor, whose cultivation was as high as his, which made Yi Zhan sigh in his heart. Worthy of being Lord Lindi, even the people around him have such terrifying cultivation. That day, the three King Ian girls went out to play again, but Lin En did not follow them. With the cultivation of the three King Ian girls, one god emperor and two demigods, I am afraid that no one in this promised city can do anything to them, so Lin En can rest assured. At this moment, Lin En moved and appeared in the eastern part of the earth. This was once the area of the Void Palace. Lin En left many of the Void Lord's men behind for the purpose of testing the Emperor Tian Legion. After all, how could they be called real soldiers without blood? At this moment, Emperor Lin appeared in the air, his thoughts swept across in an instant, and then a strange look appeared on his face. It seemed that Lan 11 was leading his men in the test. Lin En hid his figure, stopped on a tree not far away, and then sat on the tree trunk. A mile away, Lan 11 was hugging her arms and staring at the front. Her expression looked quite cold, and her temperament was also cold. She was completely different from what Lin En saw on weekdays. Even her eyes were as cold as ice. Only the small white strip of snow exposed at the waist under the leather coat was still so touching. Lin An showed a somewhat interested expression. This was the first time he had seen Lan 11 like this. He did not expect that she would be like this in front of his subordinates. But it was also reasonable to think that with ice as the will of life, no matter how enthusiastic she could not be that hot. The situation in front of him was more reasonable. He thought that those attitudes in daily life were only shown to Lin En. But when he thought of this, Lin En had a headache instead. He simply stopped thinking about it and looked at Lan 11 in the shadows of the trees. Not far from Lan 11, several people were fighting with a strange beast at this moment, and there were several people waiting not far from her. Lin En counted them and found that there were exactly 10 people. It seems that she is going to train the 10th level team leaders first, and then let the team leaders train their subordinates, Lin En said secretly, and saw Lan 11's purpose at a glance. Among these people, the half-god team leader was there, which further confirmed Lin An's guess. Soon, the fights ended one after another. Some of the team leaders won, some were injured, but without exception, all of them won, and Lan 11 didn't need to take action. Lan 11 still stood there, her face was still cold. Your skills are far from being proficient, far from it. You are all team leaders of the Emperor Tian army, are you going to lead your men in such a miserable state? At this point, Lan 11 waved her hand and said coldly, go to the next venue. After saying that, Lan 11 moved her body, and her delicate body disappeared in an instant. The other team leaders looked at each other and hurriedly followed. Seeing them disappear, Lin An smiled faintly, and was relieved, and then returned to the Emperor Tian Palace. With his mind sweeping across, Lin An soon found the position of the priest and directly sent a message, Priest, go and bring all your subordinates above the national level of the God of Law. Wait in the outer hall when you come back. That day, Lin An ordered Yi Zhan to find a place for the priest to live, not far from the emperor's palace. At this moment, hearing Lin An's message, the priest immediately said respectfully, I will do it right away. Hearing the reply, Lin An nodded and then sat down on the side. After so many days of relaxation, he also had to start practicing, and practice could not be interrupted. Time passed slowly, and soon, Lin An suddenly opened his eyes, with a solemn look in his eyes. He felt a wave that was enough to make people change color. Lin An closed his eyes, calmed his mind, and soon the vast thoughts spread out. Very far, very far. I don't know how far away it is. In the depths of the universe, Lin An can feel a wave of destruction coming from deeper. It was like a planetary collision with a terrifying momentum. Unfortunately, Lin An's thoughts could only reach this point and he could not explore further, but what he saw was enough to let him know the source of the fluctuation. Cosmic explosion. It was hard to imagine what a horrifying scene that would be, with planets moving sideways and colliding violently, and violent flames and streamers sweeping in all directions, forming a terrifying wave of destruction. Planetary collision. The appearance of this incident made Lin An a little uneasy, but fortunately, it was unknown how far away from here, and it must not be transmitted to here. Lin An withdrew his perception, but the wave of destruction lingered in his heart. At this moment, the priest suddenly sent a voice, Lord Lin Di, I have taken everyone to the outer hall according to your instructions. Lin An opened his eyes and disappeared in a flash. The outer hall on the first floor was now filled with densely packed figures, and there were no less than hundreds of them. Among them, national-level gods of law are the most numerous, followed by world-class gods of law, and there are only a dozen or so demigods. However, Lin An could tell at a glance that the bodies of these people were all strange beasts. However, this matter was not a problem. With the existence of soul contracts, no matter what race they were, they could not make any waves, but had to obey them obediently. And these strange beasts were enough to make the strength of Zhu domain rise to a higher level. Raising his hand and waving, a space crack appeared, and Lin An said lightly, follow me. The space crack became larger and larger. As Lin An stepped in, these people also stepped in one after another. In the end, everyone walked in. Outside Zhu domain, in front of the ancient tree of life, the figures of these hundreds of people suddenly appeared. Chen Daoming, come here, there is good news. Chen Daoming was in Zhu domain. Hearing Lin An's sudden message, he was startled and came immediately. His body appeared, and Chen Daoming saw this large group of people at a glance, and his pupils shrank violently. Hundreds of strong men, among whom there were more than a dozen demigods like him. Chen Daoming took a deep breath and subconsciously activated all his skills. However, when he thought that it was Lin An who summoned him here, he felt relieved. Then he turned his eyes and found Lin An's figure. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 389. Lin, what is this? Lin An looked calm. These people will be your subordinates from now on, and they will be responsible for guarding the security of the 9 provinces territory. What? Chen Daoming's eyes almost stared down. Forget about the hundreds of world-level Dharma gods and national-level Dharma gods, but these beings with the same level of cultivation as him will all become his subordinates in the future? Although he has the same cultivation level, how can he be so virtuous and capable? Lin An glanced at him indifferently. You should be calmer, aren't they just a few demigods? Look at your surprise. Chen Daoming couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth. Aren't they just a few demigods? He is also a demigod, okay. Smiling bitterly to himself, Chen Daoming could only nod in agreement. Then Lin An asked the priest to assist Chen Daoming in completing the contract, and he himself disappeared in a flash. Just let the priest do these little things. With the existence of a soul contract and the ability to control life and death with a single thought, Lin didn't have to worry about any evil thoughts coming from the priest. Time went like this, and some days passed. With the disappearance of the 4 giants and the encirclement and suppression by the Emperor Tian Legion, the east, south, and west directions gradually began to be cleared, and humans also began to explore these 3 directions. As for the north, because of the priest, Lin An only drove away those alien races and drove them to the far north. Therefore, the north is the cleanest place, and human exploration is also the fastest. Lin An's thoughts were generally swept over. Judging from their posture, they seemed to be preparing to continue building the city in other directions. Lin An paid no attention to this. He had restored peace to the world and left the rest of the development to them. On this day, Lin An returned to the residence at the top of the Kyushu territory. The 3 Kingian girls have already fallen in love with Dishan Palace. The luxurious bedroom really makes them want it. Lin An didn't want to restrain them. Anyway, with their cultivation, there was nowhere in this world that they couldn't go to. At this moment, Lin An was sitting alone in the room, closing her eyes, and her aura gradually calmed down. Facing that mysterious figure that day, Lin An almost knew the opponent's depth. Just an illusion had the strength of a god emperor. The strength of that mysterious figure must be extremely strong. At least with his current cultivation level, I am afraid it is still difficult to defeat him. Therefore, Lin began to retreat again. There are no years of practice. The breeze blows away winter and summer, sends away spring and autumn, and the time of a year flows quietly. 1 year has passed, and humans have built cities in the southeast, northwest, and northwest. They are named after the heart, which means the center. The big cities in the east, west, south, and north seem to have become the core of the 4 directions. Although they are not as large as the promised city, they are still very prosperous. The Emperor's heavenly army has already finished wiping out the remnants of the foreign races. Those with advanced levels of cultivation were gradually killed, while those with low level were released into the mountains and forests. At this moment, the Emperor's heavenly army has also made great progress. The number of demigods has reached 8 people, and the Legion commander Lan 11 has advanced to the level of God Emperor. And also the deputy commander Yi Zhan has reached the level of God Emperor. Ever since Lin An pointed out his shortcomings in cultivation, Yi Zhan has been holding back a surge of energy in his heart. Lin An trusts him so much, how could he let Lin An down? During these days, the priests gradually integrated into the human race, and sometimes competed with Lan 11 and Yazan. The fact that Lan 11 and Yazan were able to advance so quickly was closely related to this matter. On this day, the sun rises in the east, and people still start a new day of life. Ever since Lin An wiped out the 4 giants, there has not been a day when humankind has not been developing rapidly. The traders who got up early in the market have already set up their stalls, and the blacksmith shop is filled with rhythmic knocking sounds. On the street, a child looked at the sky and pulled the sleeve of the woman next to him. "Mom, is that a shooting star?" The woman was bargaining with the vegetable farmer. Thinking that she could erase the last bit, she lowered her head and grabbed the child's hand pointing to the sky. Where did the meteor come from in broad daylight? The woman glanced at the sky casually, then looked at the vegetable farmer again and was about to speak. Suddenly she couldn't help but look startled, and then she looked up at the sky again. What did she see? In the blue sky, tiny red light spots can be seen trailing a little tail. If the color were not red, they really looked like the shooting stars that children said. This tiny spot of light would have been difficult to see in such a huge sky unless one had keen observation. However, at this moment, the number of these tiny spots of light could not be clearly seen. They were like raindrops, almost covering the entire sky. Oh my God, the woman subconsciously covered her mouth, with an incredible look on her face, as if everything in front of her was beyond the scope of her cognition. And this scene gradually began to spread throughout the earth, and even in the Kyushu region above the sky, this scene also appeared. What is that? How can there be meteors all over the sky? The meteor is white. What kind of meteor is this? That's a meteorite, it must be a meteorite. The red color is the flame burning on the meteorite. There were more and more conversations, and many people on the street who were strangers to each other started talking to each other because of the scene in front of them. However, this is just the beginning. Just a few minutes later, someone suddenly made a surprised sound. It's fake. Am I dazzled? Why do I feel that those meteorites have become bigger? Hey. When you say that, I seem to think it's a bit bigger than before. Wait, get bigger. A consciousness gradually rose in people's hearts, and a fact soon appeared in people's hearts. The meteorites are getting bigger, which means that the meteorites are approaching quickly, and it also means that their direction is the Earth. Originally, they thought that it was a lucky thing to be fortunate enough to witness this rare meteor shower with their own eyes, but when this meteor shower that seemed to have no end was coming towards the Earth, these lucky psychology soon turned into great fear. If such a large number of meteor showers hit the Earth, what will happen can be imagined. The panic, like a plague that fermented to the extreme, spread in an instant. Universe, Zhu domain. Chen Daoming was processing documents. He didn't sleep well last night and woke up several times. Chen Daoming's face was not very good, and a hint of irritability could be seen faintly. Since he was promoted to the Divine Emperor, Chen Daoming has never had such a moment. At this moment, he has not realized what this abnormal reaction will mean for someone of his level of cultivation. Chen Daoming slapped the document on the table, leaned back in his chair, then closed his eyes and rubbed his forehead. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 390. And at this moment, suddenly the office door was knocked open by someone. Deputy Commander, something big, something bad is going to happen. Chen Daoming frowned, his eyes even more irritated. He opened his eyes impatiently and looked at his subordinates, What do you look like in such a panic? Has the sky fallen? The subordinate's neck shrank, but the panic on his face did not fade away at all. He just raised his finger and pointed at the floor-to-ceiling window behind Chen Daoming. Deputy Commander, the sky has really fallen. Look outside. Chen Daoming suddenly became furious and slapped the table. Say it again. Don't you want to do it anymore? Are you kidding? The sky is falling? Do you think Chen Daoming is mentally ill? The subordinate was almost crying. Really, look outside. Chen Daoming couldn't help but look suspiciously. His subordinate's expression didn't look like he was faking it. Moreover, he knew his subordinate's character. How could he possibly do such a ridiculous prank? So Chen Daoming moved his feet, the office chair turned half a circle, and Chen Daoming was almost facing the floor-to-ceiling window. For a moment, Chen Daoming's face was stunned. The boundless meteorites were burning with rolling flames and emitting thick smoke, forming long tail flames. And behind the tail flame, there were traces of black smoke. And this scene enveloped the entire sky. Oh my God! Chen Daoming murmured subconsciously, and the dullness on his face lasted for 3 or 4 seconds. The next second, Chen Daoming's thoughts came back to him, and all kinds of thoughts flashed through his mind. At this moment, even Chen Daoming was a little confused. But at this moment, there is also something that is hard to wrap my head around, and there is Yi Zhan who is on Earth. At this moment, Yi Zhan also raised his head and stared blankly at this apocalyptic scene. In front of Yi Zhan's eyes, these meteorites were not that huge. After all, the Juyi realm was in the sky, and the meteorite belt was received much earlier than on the Earth. However, this does not mean that the Earth will be spared. The Kyushu region was only the size of the Earth originally, but now the Earth is nearly as large as a solar system. Under this situation, there is no way that the Jiuzhu territory can block the Earth. On the contrary, the entire ancient tree of life in the Jiuzhu territory will suffer. As time goes by, the meteorites in front of us are rapidly growing in size at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the long run, many meteorites will be unimaginably large. And at this moment, on the Earth and the 9 nether realm, there were countless figures floating thousands of miles high in the sky at the same time, and their bodies had a strong aura of cultivation shaking the void. He is a strong human being. Looking at their posture, they were actually preparing to use manpower to resist those extraterrestrial meteorites. At the upper level of the Kyushu territory, the 3 goddesses looked awe-inspiring, and not far from them was Chen Daoming, who looked complicated. Regarding this matter, he originally did not want the 3 women to get involved. Once something happened to the 3 women, what would he explain to Lin En? Take your life. Even your life is not enough. Not to mention that Kimeng and Banmen were his biological daughters, and he tried his best to prevent the 3 girls from taking off. However, the will of the 3 women turned out to be particularly strong. Now, not only King Ian, but also Banmen and Kimeng were both born into Xuanhuan. With the cultivation of these 3 Xuanhuan, even Chen Daoming could not dissuade them. According to the words of the 3 women, the whole world is gone. What kind of cultivation and life are needed? How can the eggs be completed under the whole family? Chen Daoming smiled bitterly and nodded, but deep in his heart, a sense of determination rose up. Back then, he dared to burn his life will to shake the Void Lord's hand, but now he also dares to resist meteorites from the sky with his own body. This is Chen Daoming, this is the former master of the 9 provinces territory. Disaster finally struck soon after. Those small light spots at the beginning are now as big as a building when you are close to them, and some are as big as a mountain. Such a scene, it is really a huge thing crashing down one after another. The Kyushu region is the first to bear the brunt. Many of those meteorites have not yet reached the Earth, but those heading towards the Kyushu region have already arrived first. At this moment, in front of the doomsday scene, figures of strong human beings rushed towards the sky again. Compared with the huge meteorites, those humans are like ants, but it is these ant-like figures that bravely rush forward in the face of this natural disaster. Among them were the strong men from the original Kyushu domain, Lin An's Kyushu guards, Lin An's fairy army, and even the priest and his men. At this moment, these figures built a moat-like defense line in front of the endless rain of meteorites. Boom! The roar began to appear. Chen Daoming was now a god emperor. He waved his hand with a big hand. Although it was insignificant compared to the mountain-like meteorite, it could withstand the terrifying impact of the meteorite. Instead, he suddenly smashed the meteorite into pieces. The violent sea of fire exploded, as if a huge firework was lit up. Chen Daoming's face became heavy. This impact was really too terrifying. At the same time as this roar appeared, more roars began to sound one after another. Some meteorites were smashed into slag, and some people could not withstand the impact and fell towards the ground at a faster speed. The tragic scene is like hell appearing here. But at this moment, a faint green light suddenly lit up. The radiance was not strong, but just a faint halo. The light was so gentle that it made people feel comfortable. But this faint halo magically spread to almost the entire battlefield. It's voiceless. The law of life that has reached the level of the God Emperor was exerted in King Ian's hands. At this moment, the area that can spread actually covers most of the Jiuzhu area. The rich life fluctuations flowed out. Under the diffusion of this breath, almost everyone felt a lightness in themselves. The benefits of the breath of life are really indescribable. Almost everyone burst out with 120% combat power in an instant. There are many more strong men who fell down without being able to withstand the pressure of the meteorites, but under the illumination of this breath of life, the shock injuries around them are recovering at a terrifying speed. However, after a few breaths, the falling figure stopped abruptly in the air, and then rushed towards the sky again at a more exciting speed. At this moment, King Ian closed her eyes slightly. Under the rich breath of life, a faint halo spread out from her as the source. At this moment, she was like the goddess of life. From the moment she stood in the sky thousands of miles high, King Ian had realized her greatest role, not to resist so many meteorites, but to let the people of this world get the strongest support. And the fact is just as she thought, with her existence, no one in this world died, but everyone has continuous fighting power.